Hey everybody, David here. It's June 2019, time for a roundtable review summary, and hope you all are doing okay. The weather's been pretty crazy, but hey, it's Chattanooga, so there you go. I have been very busy of late with regards to what I'll be doing starting in the fall at UTC. I've already talked with you about that. Taking the C.S. Lewis Society, basically taking it to UTC, turning it into a UTC ministry. I might have to change the name of it. The reason is that I've been told that of late, both the C.S. Lewis Company and the Tolkien Company have been approaching study centers that are using names from Lewis's stuff or Tolkien stuff, and giving them a little bit of trouble about that. And it's been suggested that we just go ahead and just preempt that by changing the name. But boy, I have no idea what to change it to right now. It's something to pray about. What are we going to call this thing? In terms of it being a study center, one of the reasons why I've been interested in just leaving it the C.S. Lewis Society is because we don't really have an established building center thing. Who knows what we're going to be able to do down there at UTC with the price of real estate anyway. Yeah, I do have an office in the Catholic Study Center, and students can come over there and visit and stuff. So maybe we can go ahead and start calling it a center and try and come up with another name. I've been toying around with the Inkling Study Center because I really want to be able to stay tied in thematically with those guys. It's just a little bit awkward, just not 100% sure. So that's a decision that has to be taken care of, and I've still been meeting with people. And one of the main things that I've been doing is working on what to plan for the fall. I want to be able to have a whole series of weekly meetings so it's already all mapped out, and it's on a poster that can go anywhere on the campus, and people will be introduced to us that way and be able to see what they can come to, what they might be interested in, and so forth. And there's one fella that I'm talking to. He's a PhD on church staff in one of the churches here locally. Real smart fella. And I might have him do a short series of things. I've got an English professor from another college coming to speak about Lewis and literature. I'm going to kick it off. People need to meet me and learn about me anyway, with a lesson, or actually a discussion on materialism related to Jordan Peterson, which I'm going to talk more with you about that here in a minute. And then the last one, since it's going to be in December before exams, is going to be about C.S. Lewis and Star Wars, which I think will be a lot of fun. I was talking with a young fella who's moving away from town recently, and he was thinking, oh, I wish I could come to that. So anyway, so that's what's going on. That, and of course, all the other ins and outs of things that you have to take care of, especially in summertime. But news, Lewis-wise, things have been fairly quiet. There has been what they're calling, I think it's a creative director, basically someone helping to work on the storyline for the Netflix series, the Narnia Netflix series. His name is Matthew Aldrich, and he has recently gained some fame by being involved in a Pixar movie that earned over $800 million. So that's good for your career, And so people are responding fairly positively to it, but he's not a real, strongly known, popular person like J.J. Abrams or Joe Johnston or somebody like that. So things are still up in the air. People are still wondering what's going to happen there. There are, of course, conferences going on around the country, but there's not a lot that I'm looking at that's really outstanding. No new big discoveries or anything like that. So, so what I wanted to do this evening with you all, because it's Monday evening, the 24th or something. Yeah, I wanted to get into the stuff that I'm already working on for my opening session for the study center in August. Probably the last week of August. When Sheila and I were visiting Blue Ridge, I guess it was sometime in May, early May or something, one of our friends asked if I knew about Jordan Peterson, and I did not know about Jordan Peterson. He says, if you're going to work with college students, you're going to have to know about Jordan Peterson because he's huge. And so he gave me a link to the short BBC interview on YouTube that he did that made him a lot more famous than he's already been. And I will connect that to you. It seems like it's about 14-15 minutes or something like that. It's very interesting. And he is a clinical psychologist who has taught at Harvard and now teaches at the University of Toronto. He's written a couple of very successful books, spends a lot of time touring around talking with people. And Peterson would not be considered a Christian. He doesn't really consider himself, well, I mean, he thinks of himself as a Christian, but just in a certain sense. But like Doug Wilson said, when Jordan Peterson talks about evolution, because he is a materialist in his worldview, he says that he says a lot of silly things, but when he talks about everything else, he is common grace on fire. You will find if you read Jordan, if you watch his videos, that there is an awful lot that he says that Jews and Christians could certainly go along with. Sometimes you have to be careful with what he means when he speaks of something. Like when he speaks of that which is divine, what does he mean by that? Because he is a thoroughgoing materialist. Well, I say he's a thoroughgoing materialist. At base, he's a materialist, which simply means that he thinks that nothing exists but matter, and that we are the product of the chance interaction of molecules billions of years ago that have eventually produced species that are trying to survive. You know, the old survival of the fittest sort of thing. So that the things that we think, the things that we feel and so forth, they're just our things that our brains are doing that are part of the whole drama of the survival of the fittest, of the development of the species and these sorts of things. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, he had a nice little summary of materialism, which I'll refer to here real quick. He says, let's see here. It's at the beginning of, let's see here. Yeah, it's at the beginning of the 4th chapter in the first part of the book, where he says, on second paragraph, I now want to consider what this tells us about the universe that we live in. Ever since men were able to think, they've been wondering what this universe really is and how it came to be there. And very roughly, two views have been held. First, there's what is called the materialist view. People who take that view think that matter and space just happen to exist and always have existed, nobody knows why, and that the matter behaving in certain fixed ways has just happened by a sort of fluke to produce creatures like ourselves who are able to think. By one chance in 1,000, something hit our sun and made it produce the planets. By another thousandth chance, the chemicals necessary for life and right temperature occurred, and so some of the matter on this earth came alive, and then by a very long series of chances, the living creatures developed into things like us. You know, I posted on the C.S. Lewis Society Facebook page today a video from probability experts that talked about the probability of these things happening by chance, and it's a whole lot more than the 1,000th chance that C.S. Lewis talks about. They were saying that the probability of just a protein molecule coming together by chance in this universe was 10 to the 164th power. In other words, basically, it's totally impossible. Then you have to consider the fact that if you want a living creature, if you want a cell, you've got to also have this, you're using the same probability, you've also got to have the carbons and the other molecules to have accidentally formed as well, and then somehow, the membrane having come together. It's absolutely, totally impossible that life formed by chance. By the way, you see that air conditioner right there? I'm going to go turn it off. I forgot it's making a lot of noise. So anyway, Jordan Peterson, he buys into this stuff. But what makes him attractive to people is that he takes evil and good seriously, which of course is something that C.S. Lewis likes. You remember in Mere Christianity, he said the only other thing besides Christianity that he'd be willing to consider is dualism, because it at least takes good and evil seriously. Jordan Peterson, in fact, is willing to acknowledge that if you look at the suffering of humanity and the things that people will do realistically, honestly, and in recognizing the depth of what can happen or is done, he is willing to say that evil has its own kind of existence. It's something transcendent. And then if there is evil, then by logical reference, then there is good. Now, he's pushing the line here of his materialism, isn't he? If you think about the materialistic view of the universe, is that everything, the entire universe, is just matter, and so you could put it, so you can think of it all as in a circle or a box, and everything that exists is in that circle or in that box. There's nothing outside of it. But if you start talking about something that seems to transcend that, if you start imagining that there is something which is not part of this chain of this narrative of the survival of the fittest of the species and all this genetic adaptation for the sake of this and so forth, it seems to not really be there, that there's no reason for it, there's no way for it to fit in. You're starting to admit something that doesn't fit in the circle, that doesn't fit in the box, which is kind of cheating in a way, but in Peterson's case, he is not cheating with an ill motive. The word cheating really kind of doesn't even fit. He's just trying to take seriously what he observes about, not just about biology and psychology and stuff, but just human life in general, and he's starting to think of these things. And another thing that Jordan Peterson does that's very important, which is the reason why he bucks the politically correct agenda as an academic. In fact, I think he's still going to court over the fact that he refuses to obey a law that was passed in Canada that you have to be willing to use whatever pronouns somebody wants you to use for them. He refuses to go in that direction. He looks upon that as tyranny, as oppression, as the same kind of philosophy that we've seen in other cultures where people try to control others, and it's become a horrible tyranny leading to death and destruction. He refuses to go that way. By the way, you'll notice in that little interview that I'm going to share with you that at one point the lady interviewer, he says that the politically correct agenda at base has the same philosophy as did the Nazis and the communists, and she says, well, the transgender people haven't killed anybody yet, and he said, no, not yet. Okay, he doesn't give in. Okay, he doesn't give in. And so where I was going with this is that he has a humility that enables him to be willing to say, as a clinical psychologist, an academic professional, there is a lot in life that is mystery still. There is a lot that we do not know about, we do not understand, and we need to be honest about that. And especially because, as he acknowledges, that human beings and life in general is so very complex. That's why you can't get into these either or political identity type things with him. He does not go there. He says it's wrong, and I agree. And so because he is humble about the attainments of science, and anthropology and sociology and these sorts of things, because he is willing to admit the fact that we still don't really know everything, then he is open. And this is where I'm trying to understand Peterson as a person. I can't point to anything specific right now, but I'd be willing to say he is open to being willing to acknowledge that there is a God like the God of the Jews and the Christians, if he had a reason to do it. If there was some sort of, for example, if there was some sort of evidence that he could observe clinically, or that he could observe in some other scientifically valid fashion that demonstrates that there is at least a mind, like Lewis says in Mere Christianity. Whatever it is that's out there, it seems to be something of a mind, and we can at least believe that. I really think that he'd be willing to do it. And because he has this humble attitude, and because he takes suffering seriously, good and evil, and because he's not politically correct, he's recognizing the damage that is being done to the men and the boys in our society and Western culture, and he speaks out against it, and young men are flocking to him. Okay, you'll run into that, as you'll see. So he's very popular. So if I make my first topic at UTC, Jordan Peterson and the problem of materialism, people are going to know who that is, and I trust that I'll be able to get some people to come. But I want to go talk about this a little bit more with you, because it's really very interesting, and I think it's helpful for us as Christians to have a good grasp on this, because this is the world that we deal with, and it's been going on forever. For example, all of us have faced the argument that you should never feel guilt. Guilt is something that's being put upon you, because there's no such thing as some sort of real morality out there. Our sense of right and wrong is just something that's just the way our synapses in our brain cells are going, or whatever. That anything that we really think is ultimately just the chemicals in our bodies at work as part of the overall, evolutionary thing. And there is, and Lewis admits this, there is an attraction to naturalism. And I always, in terms of the attraction of it, I often think of Carl Sagan. Many of you all have seen his television programs. And I remember one in particular where Carl Sagan had a plexiglass vat. It was just a cube with the top off. And inside that cube is filled maybe halfway with water. And then there are all these little plastic colored cubes that represented, the molecules of the universe, the building blocks of the universe, or whatever. And then he looked at that, and he stirred it up, and he says, that's all that there is. And he says, that's all that we are. We are made up of the same stuff that stars are made of, that the planets are made of. We're made up of just all this amazing matter. Isn't it beautiful? And you put it in a certain imaginative sense, you can think, yeah, that is cool. And we know there's order in the universe, and it's a beautiful order, and the intricacies are amazing. So that when you look at the natural universe, there's a lot there to wonder at and to consider the beauty of, and these sorts of things. And if somebody sentimentally comes along and says, and you're part of this wonderful thing, you go, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Until you start talking about things like morality, justice, love, guilt, innocence. You start talking about things that are important to the human heart. Somehow those things don't fit. They don't fit. Lewis proves this for us in Mere Christianity when he talks about our natural sense of morality. And the argument from evolution would be somehow we've got this sense of right and wrong because it helps us to process things in our communities, in our societies, in our own psyche, in order that we as a species may continue to be superior and continue to advance and survive and all the other evolutionary stuff. But Lewis points out, he says, there are some if you take the basic moral standpoint of the Tao, the golden rule, do unto others as you have them do unto you, or love your neighbor as yourself. There can be circumstances where, if you are trying to be faithful to do what you know is right, you have to do something that is dangerous to yourself, that is contrary to your survival. In fact, it may even kill you. The classic thing is jumping into a freezing river to save somebody that's fallen in, and that sort of thing. So that he says, therefore, how can, if the moral instinct can lead us to self-destruction, then it doesn't fit this evolutionary explanation. And there are other things like this. And Peterson is honestly wrestling with that. He sees evil that is so evil, it looks to him like somehow it's part of something else. It's not. It transcends just the evolutionary process. And that's the right thing for him to see. We would agree with that, wouldn't we? And that's one of the arguments that have often been made. It's the arguments Francis Schaeffer used to make about this business of materialism, is that if materialism is the way the universe is, then your love for your wife and your children is meaningless, because love is just neurons doing stuff, part of the biological processes. It doesn't really matter. I think about eugenics, which was very popular in mid-20th century. Not just, we think about the Germans. It was popular here in America too. It was popular in a lot of places. There was serious discussion about promoting races or people in different races that are healthier and are more the kind of person that we want people to become, and then getting rid of the people that are weaker and don't fit. People were thinking about that kind of thing. And if you think about it, eugenics fits into evolutionary theory. You're thinking about, survival of the fittest stuff. Let's perfect humanity. Let's help humanity become stronger and therefore holding its position in nature more strongly and more efficiently, and providing more of a future of a survival of humanity. But our hearts cry out against that. We think it is unjust. I mean, how dare you, just murder people because you think somehow they're inferior to you? It's ridiculous. Though, of course, eugenics also, there were other things, genetic manipulation, abortion. There's all kind of different things that were involved in it. But you can't help but think about the Germans and they're trying to purify the German people and that sort of thing. So that there are things that about the strictly, totally materialistic universe that the human heart rebels against. Jordan Peterson's heart rebels against it, and C.S. Lewis says, "Aha!" And I believe it's in Mere Christianity. Let me double check here if it's in Mere Christianity or it's in Miracles. I forget which one it was in, but he talks about how if there was at least this mind outside of the material universe that brought the material universe to pass, or that interferes with it in some way, whatever, it's at least there. Since it's outside of the universe, here the mind is outside the universe, there's no way that we're ever going to see it if we're limited to our five senses and to scientific experimentation and observation as we think of it today. If we're ever going to have any objective evidence, it has to have somehow been put into the objective universe by this mind or this being, and it will somehow evidence itself to our experience. And then Lewis says, well, that's what you are. That's what human beings are. We have in us things, justice, morality, love, so forth, things in us that are unlike anything else in the in the universe. We're unique, and it doesn't. And there are things about these things that we find in ourselves that don't seem to fit. That seem to fit some sort of higher order. And Jordan Peterson would say, yeah, everybody knows this. So it's one of the things that you can enjoy about him is he'll say something that's common sense, that that people who are not bound up into just these particular categories of political correctness and stuff, and he'll say, we all know this is true. And you go, yeah, you're right, we do know it's true. And we know that this is true about human beings, and it's in our experience. And so Lewis says, well, there you are. There's a revelation here that there is someone outside of this material universe. There's something else that we can appeal to. Lewis doesn't mention here, but it is miracles. We could say miracles have happened. Of course, the comeback would be, well, how do we know that they've happened? We could say, well, there are historical records of them. Well, how do you know they're reliable? Well, then how do you know they're not reliable, etc., etc.? There's also another thing that we could appeal to, which is really getting a lot of interesting traction, and that is in the field of mathematics, quantum mechanics, and string theory. Because, well, let me tell you, one time when Sheila and I were visiting our friends over in Cambridge in 2012, one of their friends was a professor of mathematics at Cambridge University, and they invited us and the professor and his wife to walk around the neighborhood. The neighborhood was having an open garden neighborhood, and you could go around visiting the different gardens in the people's property in the neighborhood, and it was a lot of fun. So I spent several hours. Oh, and by the way, Spitfires from Duxford Airfield would fly over every once in a while, which I especially like. But at any rate, this professor and I were walking along, and he is a Christian, and he was telling me that they are getting to the point now that via their mathematical extrapolations, they're actually looking into unseen realms, unseen parts of the universe. They're actually able to say something about what has to be there based upon what is observed here, and then mathematical extrapolation. As long as the formulas are correct, then their conclusions are correct. So that instead of saying, well, I had an after-death experience, so I know there's something else there, they're saying, mathematically, according to string theory, we're looking at these things. And I've looked into the string theory thing more, and it's very common now for them to say that there are multiple dimensions. In other words, in fact, in order for some of their calculations to work, there have to be at least 10 or 11 different dimensions of existence. And so what you have here is you have got serious scholars who are saying that there is more that exists and that needs to be taken into account as to what this universe is and how it behaves. Well, of course, it's, if that's the case, then what's wrong? You say, well, why can't there be the unseen dimensions where Jesus is right now? Where he sits on the throne of David, and he rules over the earth and holds everything together by the word of his power. You see what I'm saying? The point of the matter being that you would think that maybe there's nothing in the material universe to behold that gives you any knowledge or suspicion that there's anything else, but it so happens that there is. The question is whether you're willing to consider it or not, which the thoroughgoing materialist is not willing to consider. And this can be on a case-by-case basis. They can each have their different reasons, but you're still dealing with sentiment. I was listening to a materialist the other day, and this woman was denying anything beyond the material universe and trying to find a reason for living And of course, there's just some sort of sentimental concept she came up with. There's finding reasons for living in a universe that's strictly materialistic. You're just left to make believe things. You just find something that is sentimentally important to you and go ahead and indulge yourself in that, and then you'll die like everybody else does and disappear into nothingness like everybody else does. And this is the argument that we Christians make and that Lewis makes, that, well, don't you see how your way of looking at the world means that your life is meaningless, ultimately meaningless. Now what Peterson does is he tries to come up with his own meaning, but it's still sentiment. For him, a meaningful life is a life where you have recognized that, yes, life is full of difficulty and suffering, but you're going to take a responsibility for your life, and you're going to try to bring as much order into and good into your life and the lives of those around you as you can. And as you do that, you will find meaning. I'm sorry. I mean, what kind of meaning are you going to find? It's still just going to be a sentiment of, I've got my act together and I've helped some people and I feel good about it. And so now I've got meaning. When it hasn't changed anything, you're still just nothing but molecules just running around. It's a meaning which falls short of what really satisfies the human heart. And something I'm going to bring up is that verse, and I think it's in Ecclesiastes, I haven't looked it up yet, but I'm pretty sure it is, where Solomon says that thou hast put eternity in our hearts. There is a dimension to our hearts that longs for meaning, purpose, love, whatever, justice, that lasts, that transcends us, that transcends all of our problems, that transcends our history, and that lasts and that we can enjoy. That's what we want. So, for example, justice. We look forward to the judgment day. Why? Well, we do in Christ. We look forward to the judgment day because finally everything will be settled, and just judgment will have come, and everything from forever will be just and right, and our hearts just long for that. A materialistic worldview does not allow that to be something that really is possible. Let's see if there's anything else I want to talk about this. Got some notes over here. Oh, now here's something else to consider, and this relates to what I was saying earlier about eternity in our hearts, by the things that we know are true about human beings that don't fit in test tubes. I think it is helpful because this doesn't happen unless you're really working on it, but it's helpful to introduce people to the fact that there is another way of knowing something is true beside scientific observation with our five senses and the use of our reason, which of course is just an illusion if you're a materialist. But anyway, how Lewis can really be good about that. He could say that why, if your idea, let's see here, where is it? Where do I have this? This is in God in the Dock. He says, if the materialist thoughts are only accidents of matter, then why should I pay attention to them? Why should the accidents of their thoughts carry more weight than any other accidents? And it's true. Okay. So there's what we call scientific knowledge. But if you read Lewis, who of course learned a good bit of this from Owen Barfield in his Poetic Diction book and in conversations with him and so forth, there is another kind of knowledge, and it is intuitive knowledge. And Jordan Peterson, we know this. It's the kind of knowledge that we have when we, for example, are, let's say, when we meet somebody. We can learn things that are true. The more time we spend with a person, the more we get to know them, and you get to where you are understanding things without having to treat them like some sort of scientific subject. Just the idea of morality, which we cannot ignore. When you know that you care about right and wrong. You don't know that you care about right and wrong because you've done a scientific experiment on yourself and you have found that this exists, and you know it because you know it. It's something that's intuitive. It is there, and you cannot deny it. Now, sorry, my nose is itching me so much. If we admit the I'm not explaining it very well at this point, but if we know that intuitive knowledge exists, then we can give credit to knowing things that are true through our human personal experience. And this is where the doctrine of regeneration is so important. People aren't really going to change their minds and believe in God until they meet Him. You can take someone like Jordan Peterson, who is willing to think about all these different things, but he will never admit that there is a personal God in the universe, just like any other materialist, until he meets Him, until there is a personal encounter. Now, to say something like that to materialists is just absolute nonsense, unless you start thinking about human experience. Isn't it possible? And well, let me say this. We all have the experience of meeting someone. We even had experience. You can have this experience. You just kind of know that maybe somebody has come into the room, though you haven't heard anything yet. All right? If God is a real person, and in fact, if His personality is the root of all personality, He's more real of a person than we are, then why can't He meet us? Why can't we have a personal encounter with Him? The Christian faith is helped by arguments, reasons to believe. But the reason we believe is we've met Jesus. He has revealed Himself to us through regeneration. He takes away the blindness, and now we see, and we see Him. It's a miracle. It's that being that's outside the material universe invading, coming in, and saying, "Hey, I'm here. Yoo-hoo. Wake up." And we jump up, and the soul recognizes its creator and its lover and rejoices. Christian faith. We weren't there at the cross, but we've still met Jesus. And it happens all the time. It's happening constantly. And as Lewis talks about in, let's see, where was it? Oh, it's in Miracles. He talks about why materialists won't believe, or just how it is that materialists, even if you were, I mean, it doesn't matter what you might show to a materialist who is convinced and is committed to refusing to believe in anything else but that which is material. They'll always have some sort of materialistic explanation for it. They'll just say, "You met Jesus, did you, huh? Something snapped in your brain. You just imagined it." They're always going to have an excuse. They're always going to have an explanation until they meet Jesus, which we hope and pray that they will. Usually, the reason a materialist refuses to acknowledge that there's something outside the material universe is there's something going on sentimentally. I was going to say something about a materialist that I was listening to the other day, and I didn't finish talking to you about that. This person was Jewish, They were deeply moved and affected by the Holocaust, and they felt like the Holocaust was blamed on religion, period. If people didn't have, because the Nazis, it was a religious belief, a totalizing sort of philosophical religious belief, which you can call religion, or you can call it, utopian ideology, or whatever it might be. When people have these things, it leads to events like the Holocaust. And so she refused, in fact, she was even physically repulsed by a religious person because she was so emotionally disturbed by what she saw was produced by religion that affected her family. And, we can understand that, but her explanation of why we go on living in such a world, which is only just chance matter anyway, just fell very flat, and it was just sentiment. So she's living by sentiment. She's trying to keep living by sentiment against religion and Christianity, especially. But it's just a it's just a posture. Because as Lewis says, just look at yourself. There are things about you that don't fit this evolutionary silliness. And so you feel sorry for people who for whatever their reason is, and it's some sentimental reason, they just don't want to go along with anything. They don't want to think. All right, let's see if there's anything else I want to say about this. Let's see. That's probably all I really need to talk about. Besides, I'm going over 40 minutes anyhow, so I probably need to let you go. I still would like for you, if you feel like you should do this, I'd still like for you to let me know if you want to be part of our prayer team for the study center. I will soon be putting together some sort of a prayer list for people to use to pray for the study center, and sharing other things with those who pray, so they can keep track of what's going on. But even then, well, at any rate, I would like for you to do that. Please, respond and let me know if you would like to be a part of that group. In the meantime, right now it's pretty straightforward. I'm doing everything that I've got to do. I've got to find places to have meetings, and I've got to find out what they're going to be about, and just a lot to do to get ready. And beside that, we're going to need support too. I'm going to be trying to work on that. So anyway, appreciate that. And listen, if there's anything else going on you want me to know about or pray about, be sure to let me know. But in the meantime, I'm just going to look forward to sending you all another video in July. We'll see what that's about, what we may be able to share. And in the meantime, have a great rest of June. And God bless you. Bye.